I was watching an interview from Michio Kaku, the Japanese quantum physicist, who basically talks about something that they uncovered when the Voyager 1 from NASA came back with the data and they were analyzing the data, and then they learned something about the quantum computing aspect of the chip that was used to analyze the data, and the fact that they found out that there was an image autonomously created by the chip. And when the scientists were interacting with the image, they were not just visually interacting, they were having an ontological response, which means that they were completely changed after that for good.
Can you give us examples of what ways they said that they were changed for good?
Yes. And it was interesting because that change was very similar to what you experienced with your DMT, by the way. So that was very interesting. But that image, when they interacted with the image, after that, they started seeing the world completely differently for good. And they actually thought that they were having a neurological effect. And because of that happening, the NASA made that whole project classified. And then it was completely shoved under the closet because it created something that they couldn't explain, they couldn't understand. They realized that the image was interacting differently depending on who was looking at it because observers affect. So all of these things, when you start seeing the quantum computing, the interaction, the reflection, the mirror effect, and the very fact that they were changed for life, where they start seeing the oneness in everything.
My guest today is Shehnaz Soni, who had a near-death experience. But I think the most fascinating thing about her is that she marries science and spirituality while working at NASA. She's working on the Artemis project, which is going to let a woman walk on the moon in 2026. And we today are going to have a very deep collaborative consciousness conversation, and I can't wait. So Shehnaz, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Laurie, for this great opportunity. And I'm very excited to see where we go with both of us, like living in this two world, right? Where we have a corporate job and then we also dance to raise awareness so that everybody can free themselves. So yeah, I think this is going to be fun.
I love it. I don't think people really who watch this understand the kind of commitment it takes to have a YouTube channel. We both have one. I mean, it takes like hundreds and hundreds of videos to get to where we both are. And a lot of people who do this do it as a full-time job. And yet we both have very demanding. I'm in technology. You're working for NASA. You've got kids. I have crazy projects I do. I just feel like I want to give you credit for making the time, because it is not like we're making tons of money doing what we're doing with this part of it. We both know that we have a mission, and mine is to wake up the collective. What would you say yours is?
Yeah, I mean, all of us are waking up ourselves and waking up the collective because that's just the way the 100 monkey effect ultimately, creates the level of consciousness where we can all live on earth. Because see, you and I would love to live with the people who can vibrate with the same frequencies we are. In order to make that happen at the level where we can have a human interaction, we're going to have to make more people aware. So technically,
Yeah.
we're doing it for ourselves because we want to live on earth where everybody vibrates with the heaven frequency.
Yeah, I love that. That's the perfect way to describe that. You had such an interesting upbringing, because from what I understand, you grew up in Pakistan, right? And you
Yes.
came here not even speaking English. And yet here we are. I would never know that English is not your first language, and you're working for a very high, I think I would call it a very, you have to be very intelligent. You have to have a lot of education, and it's a very high position to have reached a level of being a NASA scientist. So why don't you just explain a little bit about who you are that way, so that the people listening can get a flavor of why we're even going to be, having this conversation.
Right. So I think that I have to say that I actually, when I became aware of my consciousness, I started living in that world, even though my physical dimension or my physical experiences were very dense, very patriarchal, very conservative, very much putting in a box of religion and cult and telling you no, 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 right? So I was living that life. And at the same time, I was aware of my consciousness. So I think that what I learned to do, and the fact that you and I are having this conversation, is I learned to weave. I learned to weave
Mm.
these two words despite of challenges, despite of obstacles, despite of lots and lots of disappointments. And the fact that I did not give up, and the fact that I stayed on my quest for weaving, is something that I feel like I was born as a gift. That to me is my gift to myself, that I am willing to weave no matter what. Because as long as I exist, I'm going to weave. And I believe that that is one of my quests for people to recognize, that that weaving is the only way out. Because the way in is through, right? So when people are
Yes.
like, how am I going to do this? So that is the recipe for integration. And I actually say that we're always dancing between the two, right? The discernment and integration. And when you learn how to weave the two, because at the end of the day, we are not just one aspect of the existence. In this um, hologram that we carry, and we have so many different frequencies to pick from, we can basically have all these different choices in terms of experiences for us to tap into in any moment. And that gift that we are all given, but not everybody's aware of, is where the dichotomy is.
So, what's interesting about being a scientist is that I feel like most scientists fall into this category where they don't have enough proof to believe in some of the spiritual aspects that we talked about before we even got on this podcast, except for maybe scientists who study quantum physics. So, is there a part of your scientific upbringing and your education that helped you get even closer to the spiritual aspect?
That is a very good question, by the way. And first, I would like to tell you that even quantum physicists not all the time connect the dot with the spirituality, even though quantum physics is the closest thing we have to spirituality. And the very fact that I actually picked up on the fact that, the whole thing about intention and observation affects momentum with the double slit experiment. When I even wrote the book, I was just, that is what my intuition led me to. And a lot of people read the book and they think that I have like a physics degree, or I'm a PhD in physics the way I speak. But at the end of the day, the only reason I was able to weave is because I've always done that. But quantum physics helped me prove it to the people who are scientific mind to accept what I already was doing. You see my point? So I just wanted to say that not everybody is connecting all these dots, because generally people have a tendency to just become one thing, and then that's all they can be. And the other reason is people are fearful, because I can tell you that even when I did my book, and I was looking for one NASA engineer to give me endorsement in the book, and I had all these colleagues who love me because we work together, we have this camaraderie. But when I would ask them to read my book, the answer I got was that no, I'm Christian.
What?
Yes,
Really?
yes, because I'm surrounded by Christians. But the point I'm trying to make is that I did not get a single, like, I mean, I was able to get endorsement from one of my colleagues from NASA, but he was like my father. But the one that other people that I wanted to get, I was not able to get it. And I was very surprised with that, because to me, like, these people are all like, they've already lived a life for a long time. And I'm like, my one book cannot change your belief, whatever you are, because my book is not meant to change people's belief, but hopefully enhance their beliefs, or give them more validation, because we all need, more proof to say, you know what, whatever I'm feeling is justified, right? Because we're here to transcend ourselves, not others. And that is what the book purpose has been. But yeah, so just to give you a little insight into our life, right? That it has been a challenge when it comes to that, because the only reason I was able to weave it is because I never lost sight of my consciousness that I was aware of, whatever age that got charged in. And I have this thing where I constantly dance between my consciousness and between what I have created. And I always like, just like even today, for example, like, if I, because today's my day off, and I was just kind of like, listening to the music, having this fun, and I'm going in my house, which I call it my subconscious mind, and I go into all these different part of my house and making it all nice and clean, and also getting rid of things and learning and dancing and all that. And I was thinking that it's so fun because I'm weaving it all when I do that. Because when I do that, I realize also what in my life needs to change so I can be more aligned within myself, right? And that is the permission that mature the people who are scientists or not doesn't give themselves. Because I see the people who are very, very spiritual and they are completely into only one channel, and very, very scientific and completely into those channel. And what I'm learning is that they both are missing something that other person has. And how about we converge the two?
I love this one part that you said about that, that made me have a thought about something I haven't thought about for a long time. Many years ago, I dated this guy who loved things, and he would decorate his house very elaborately, but there was a lot of stuff. There was stuff everywhere. And he also had a lot of like kind of issues, like issues with family members, and how he just felt on some levels that he wasn't good enough. And I broke up with him, not really because of that, because of some other things, but in hindsight, one of the things that it was kind of made aware is that the way that people live, the way that they keep their house is a reflection of their state of mind. And the reason that I'm bringing this up is because of the statement that you made before this call. It's your day off. And by the way, thank you for doing something like this, which is a little bit like work on your day off. But you went room to room and you said you were cleaning and clearing. And I picked up on that because I feel like we might be in the same vein of that. And I have been like that in my life. Like, I'm not a things person. Everything has its place. I don't have a lot of things out. And I feel like it's a little bit of a reflection of what's going on inside. And if my house does get a little bit in a little bit of disarray because of a project or something, it actually affects me mentally. So will you speak to that? Because I know that you've got something there.
100%, because our house is a representation of our subconscious mind. Because if you think about it, the fact that that's where we spend the most of the time feeling comfortable, right? So whatever you feel comfortable in means that that is your projection of law of attraction. You've created your house as a representation of your projection, of your consciousness, of your law of attraction in the form of subconscious mind. And therefore, like, it's funny because even when I had arranged marriage in my early 20s, one of the criteria they have is that if when they're picking up these guys based on their attributes, the best thing is if they live in the same cities, you go and check their house out as a gauge that are they good for your daughter. So it's kind of interesting that how I come from this very wise religion, if you think about it, because they have a lot of wisdom that they carry in deciding and discerning who's good for whom. But that, at the time, of course, I wasn't aware of it, but now, like, I even have friends who look really beautiful outside, but when you sit in the car with them or when you go in their house, it's not what it is. And for me, when I pick up that, because it's kind of like the part that they're showing you is the only the the top of the iceberg. The rest of the part that they don't show you is you get to see if you go and sit in their car or sit in their house, or certain things, it shows that how they really are and whether you feel aligned or not. So to me, like, my house is always ready for anybody to walk in
Me
because I
too.
love people coming in, right? Because that to me is exciting. And to me also, it shows that I'm not preparing it for you. I'm making it for me.
Exactly. Oh my gosh. I think people that are watching, some people just went, oh shit. And other people are like, yes, I'm there. Like, take this stuff with a grain of salt, but these are things that I think are an actual reflection. And it's just an interesting way to look at something as a subconscious mind, but it makes a lot of sense because it is where you are spending the majority of your time for most people.
Exactly.
Interesting. Okay. I want to ask you a little bit about the Artemis project that you're working on because I have a very specific line of questioning I want to ask you about the moon. So, will you tell me a little bit about what this is and what the objective it is and how you're even working on this?
Yeah. So the reason I'm working on it is partly because when I when I immigrated from Pakistan to America, one of my condition for moving was to continue my education, and that led me to go to the best school in LA. So LA was the place where I got my foundation from, and the very fact that when I graduated as an engineer, my goal was not just to get any job. My goal was to get the job that would be something unique that nobody's working on, which is how I ended up working on International Space Station, and I worked on Space Launch System, and now I'm working on Human Landing System under Artemis program. That was my pathway to end up being at NASA and following all these path. So Artemis program actually was mainly named as a sister, twin sister of Apollo. Apollo series, remember we went through, and Artemis is, so that's why the whole men and women aspects is like a divine feminine rising from a spiritual perspective. And the entire goal for going to moon was ultimately to live on a moon, so that way we can have, we can master the art of living somewhere other than Earth, right? Because moon is easy because it's close. And then now, with the current administration, the focus is actually more on living on Mars, which to me is also very interesting because there's, when you look at it from a purely from a physical and scientific standpoint, it's all about proving ourselves that we can live in a very, very challenging environment. At the same time, not just uh, the fact that if you can live in a challenging environment and if you can create basic needs for resources like water and fuel, then what you're proving is that you are able to, create the Star Trek world, right? The Star Trek world. So that to me is something that my technical side, my scientific side, gets excited about, because I believe in the Star Trek world where everybody is doing exactly what they love, not because of the money, but because of their passion, because the entire system is built on that. And so to me, that's what I feed into when I go and work in a project like that. And as long as it's feeding my soul like that, I'm continuing that dance.
Well, I think I was about 6 months old, or a few months, I would think maybe even 3 months old. Was it July of 1969 that they landed on the moon the first time?
Yeah.
Okay, so I was a few months old when that happened.
Mhm.
It's been a minute since we've been on the moon. So why do you think there is a reason to go back now? What is the goal? Is it actually to live on it?
Yes.
And so we would have an opportunity to explore, I'm going to call the dark side of the moon. Thank you, Pink Floyd, for that album. But we would be able to explore that side, correct?
That is exactly the intent. And to me, like, I think if we do live on a moon, the very fact that there are so many questions about the moon, that what really moon is, and what does
Yes.
it symbolize, and the interesting thing that we are talking about subconscious mind earlier, and according to Kabbalah, moon represents the subconscious mind.
Oh, interesting. All full circle there. So one of the things that I saw on a show that I watch is that there is a lot of interesting information about the moon that I don't understand. They say that the moon makes a very specific sound. People have said that the moon is hollow. Aliens are living inside the moon. There's like so much information, misinformation, conspiracy kind of things out there. Tell us from your NASA standpoint, what is the moon?
Okay, so from a NASA standpoint, the moon is like a treasure chest of resources, exotic resources that we cannot find on Earth, right? So from a
Really?
NASA, yeah,
Exotic resources we cannot find on Earth. Can you give me an example of
I
one?
mean, helium-3 is one of the one that everybody's aware of.
What is it? What is it?
It's called helium-3.
Oh, helium-3. I have
Yes.
not heard of that
And
before.
it can be source of power. It can actually completely provide power to Earth for a long time, and we wouldn't even have any energy crisis if we can do that. However, to me, like, I believe that anytime, I mean, that is the one reason, right? But there are other reasons, but all of these reasons ultimately is to expand consciousness from one place to another, because when you plant yourself in a different um, you know I don't want to call moon anything because I know everybody has opinion on it, but moon represents a place that is different than Earth. Would you agree with
Yeah.
that?
Yes.
So we can at
Yes.
least all agree with that, even though we may not agree what moon is. And that's why, to me, like, let's look at all the agreement that we have rather than following a disagreement. Because part of the thing is that nobody truly knows, because I have not personally gone to the moon and come back, and I don't have that credential to actually truly know about it. So I'm not going to say, oh, I 100% know what the moon is. No, I would never make that claim, which is why I said what NASA believes versus what I believe versus what it is. All of that questions can become more prevalent, because right now it's not just America and NASA is going to the moon. There's Chinese, there's Indian, there is European. So the very fact that if everybody goes to the moon and they all say whatever the moon is, like then we have to say whether they're all lying, which is also possible, or whether they're all agreeing. But at the end of the day, that way we're not putting all our eggs in one basket.
That makes a lot of sense. So do you think it'll really happen in 2026?
So right now the plan is 2027 because
Okay.
it was meant to be 2024, but then budget, Congress. So there's always the schedule. But right now the current schedule is saying 2027, and to me, definitely we're going to, like, before 2030, we're either going to be in moon or whether either going to be in Mars, but one or the other, it's going to happen, because right now the focus is very heightened in both of those places.
If you were going to place a bet, which one do you think is going to happen first?
I think that ideally Mars is where definitely is going to happen. I wouldn't say first, but I know Mars is going to happen for sure. The first part is where it gets a little bit tricky because of the budget and because of how we're going to get there, and what the purpose is, right? Which is being uncovered.
Right. Wow. Well, what do you want us to know about what you've uncovered as far as consciousness is concerned? Because you wrote this book that is, you called it an encyclopedia of all of the information and beliefs that you have gathered throughout your lifetime.
Yes, yes. And that's why I kind of give this title, right? The quantum being. And my whole thing is that the quantum being basically is the bridge between our divine self, right? Our higher self, our best versions, and where we are in our life, right? So I created a bridge because I needed that bridge for me to weave, right? Weave the life that I wanted to create. And I'm constantly weaving and constantly learning. So the book basically is, I call it my fifth child, because I delivered it right after my fourth child went to college, because I felt like, okay, I can give myself a permission to be who I am, and I wanted to get to know myself, right? So that was the trigger for the book. But the reason it helps people bridge that gap is because it uses the quantum physics, which everybody's learning that it's becoming more and more mainstream now. People are understanding what quantum physics is, and in a simple language, quantum physics is the physics of very, very small. And in the physics of very, very small, when you are wanting to understand the very, very small, like an electron and photon, and if you look up the double slit experiment, it proves to everyone, whether you're a scientist or not, that your consciousness affects your experience. That is the bottom line message the entire book highlights. And for me, because I went for my quest of understanding myself, I went to mystery schools. I understood Kabbalah to the extent where I taught the Kabbalah 12 years ago. And Kabbalah and quantum physics are just two sides of the coins. One is explaining the journey of light using Kabbalistic principle. The other one is sharing the journey of light through the double slit experiment, right? So they both are saying the same thing. And what they're saying is that you are a conduit. You are the conduit, and consciousness is fundamental. Like earlier when we were talking, and you pretty much said that you proved to yourself that it's all love. You proved to yourself that human beings are kind of like really like in the dense reality, we experience this humanness, but in all other dimensions, in all other higher dimensions, or whatever you want to call them, you actually realize how much we are all connected. And that is exactly what I basically explicitly explain using so many different examples. And one thing happened recently, and I actually publish little clips on my YouTube channel on that. And I do that, by the way, whenever I get this realization, that I was watching an interview from Michio Kaku, the Japanese quantum physicist, who basically talks about something that they uncovered when the Voyager 1 from NASA came back with the data, and they were analyzing the data, and then they learned something about the quantum computing aspect of the chip that was used to analyze the data, and the fact that they found out that there was an image autonomously created by the chip. And when the scientists were interacting with the image, they were not just visually interacting, they were having an ontological response, which means that they were completely changed after that for good.
Can you give us examples of what ways they said that they were changed for good?
Yes. And it was interesting because that change was very similar to what you experienced with your DMT, by the way. So that was very interesting. But that image, when they interacted with the image, after that, they started seeing the world completely differently for good. And they actually thought that they were having a, neurological effect. And because of that happening, the NASA made that whole project classified. And then it was completely shoved under the closet because it created something that they couldn't explain, they couldn't understand. But what it did was it again proved my book, The Quantum Being, because what it showed was, and not only that, the other thing that they realized that the image was interacting differently depending on who was looking at it because observers affect. So all of these things, when you start seeing the quantum computing, the interaction, the reflection, the mirror effect, and the very fact that they were changed for life, where they start seeing the oneness in everything. So to me, that was actually a good thing. However, it was acted like it's like some sort of disease. Like I'm like, we lost our scientists now.
I think it's interesting because I think it's even a step further than somebody thinking we lost the scientists. I really feel that over time, we have abilities that have been minimized, hidden, ostracized, because if we have them, if we understand how powerful we are, it takes power away from people who want to control us. So if everybody were to understand that we truly were one, then there's a lot of people who have things that they would lose if that concept was actually embraced and understood and believed by people. And I love that you're sharing this. I have never heard anything like this before. So just to clarify, that probe that came back with images, when scientists interacted with these images, it not only affected them and they all saw different things, but it somehow maybe opened, connected, like turned something on so that they could see the world with a different lens than what they were looking at it before.
Exactly.
What do you think would happen if everybody had access to those images to have that same experience? If everybody did that, what do you think would happen on our world, in our world?
So I would actually even go far that we don't need an image because we're continuously doing that with every interaction that we interact with. This just proves that it does work. It does happen. So, like in my chapter 6 in my book, I really go deep dive into the Unseen mirror, which basically is the ancient wisdom that comes from the unseen. And it basically says that how we are continuously interacting with what we are working on, right? Based on our internal patterns because of our subconscious mind. So, to me, that experiment just proves that consciousness is fundamental. So we don't really need to all get the access to the image. What we need to do is, wow, what kind of image are we creating? Because that image was autonomously created even when the quantum computer was not even turned on. So there's just so many caveats about it that it almost becomes like the entire experience becomes higher dimensional than physical dimensional because the image was autonomously created. When they saw the image, they had like different image that they experience. I mean, there are all these variables in the equation that actually just proves all the things that we are interacting in our daily lives. So to me, rather than focusing on what what happened, more like how can I leverage that for me right now in this moment?
Beautiful. You just gave us all our power back.
That is exactly what I love to do all the time.
I love that. Okay, well, I want to go back to something you mentioned earlier. You just very flippantly said, I attended some mystery schools. Will you explain what you mean by that? I, of course, have heard the term mystery schools. I understand that they're connected to certain sects of people who have, maybe ancient information or information that they've gathered over time. What mystery schools did you go to?
So the first one I went to was locally in my town, actually, and it was when I was basically, and that's why I came to Huntsville to find my spiritual self. I was actually wondering, I was pontificating my divorce with my second husband. At the time, I had 3 kids, and part of me was wondering about my own fear of driving in the darkness and all that. And then I stumbled onto the ad which talks about metaphysics 101, and I am like, what is that? Because I knew all about physics, but no metaphysics. So I kind of go to that school because that triggers me. And then I take Metaphysics 101 and then I love what I learned. So then I keep taking every single class they can offer to the point where I end up saying that what else can I learn? And then they said Kabbalah. And there was no teacher for Kabbalah. So I ended up becoming a teacher myself. So that's how I actually completely got all the way to the point where I felt satisfied with my own quest of understanding my consciousness. And then the second mystery school I went to was called the Modern Mystery School, which one of my fan actually recommended me to watch one of Dr. Teresa Bullard's video, and that's how I kind of got into the Modern Mystery School. I was there for less than a year, and I learned because I was a Kabbalah teacher, but I took Kabbalah, and I learned some of the ceremonial ways that they do things, and it was very interesting to me. However, there was a part that I didn't feel like it was well integrated from my perspective, so I did not stay in that school. But what I did was that by being in both of these schools and learning different aspect of it and my own life, I kind of weaved it all. I weaved it all, which is all kind of explicitly shared in my book, is how did I weave it all and how do I embody that in everyday life? Because to me, I am not here just to learn, I'm here to embody everything I learn.
I'm not here just to learn. I am here to embody everything that I learned. So what is the biggest thing that you feel proud of or successfully have embodied that you're like, wow, that was a big deal to do?
I think it's to realizing that the definition of success has always been misguided, and
Mm.
to a large extent, because I tend to go towards perfection because it's kind of a challenge, it's a quest, it's fun, right? So why not? But then in the process, I learned that the gauge that everybody else has created for success is very misleading, and I had to go all the way to be successful from everybody else's perspective to realize that I'm going to decide what success is because of how I feel rather than how it looks.
I love that on so many levels because a lot of times I think people do things because of how they will look to others, not because of how they will feel about it themselves. That's super empowering. So what are the things that you feel like you have accomplished, achieved in a measure of success in that vein of thinking?
I feel like that even being aware of the message that will resonate with everyone, the message that you and I are sharing right now. I have to be very honest, like I have like about 5K on my YouTube, and I get emails every week like that I can help you with your YouTube, I can help you with your Instagram. But to me, it doesn't sound exciting to me to spend my energy trying to get my followers lined up. So for me, what I've learned is to give myself a permission to do what I really, really want to do, even though it doesn't make sense. Even though, because the business that I would love to multiply so I can have more freedom requires me to do a lot of things that I may not want to do. But then what I've
Mm.
decided is that I am no longer going to do anything I don't want to do. And if that means that my subscriber will stay as 5K, then I'm okay with it. You know why? Because the success, the gauge that I have for success is how I feel while I do everything for my passion.
And I think when you are operating from that place, I don't think that the universe can help but to conspire to bring all of that to you.
Exactly, because I mean, like that is the one thing that when I went to Gaia, for example, or when I went to Next Level Soul Ascension Conference, all the other speaker who showed up, they have like thousands, thousands of subscribers. They're very famous, and I mean, it was very different, right? I was the unicorn there. I was definitely a pattern buster, and to me, the fact that I still got to speak in front of hundreds of people because Gaia believed in me, Alex Ferrari believed in me, is an example of what you just said. The universe is conspiring, and I'm going to do that dance because as I do it, I'm also distributing permission for you and for everybody else who's going to listen that we can all do whatever the hell we want and create the Star Trek world just by our actions.
Yep, absolutely. All right, I'm curious. I know you do this quantum coaching with people. And First of all, before I ask you this question, tell me a little bit about what you mean when you do something that's quantum coaching.
So what I mean by quantum coaching is that when people sign me up, and I still, even though I work full time in the corporate world and I do all these other things, I still have a young son who basically is my important project. He's 14. Despite of all of that, I actually love to do quantum coaching because what it does is that it's like a one-on-one, just like you and I are talking, and it is a session where people, sign me up because they are somewhere in their life where they are at the crossroad, right? They're wondering what they need, some catalyst, somebody to be a catalyst for them, which is what I say. So I become a quantum catalyst for them. But quantum coaching means that we are not just communicating about the problem, we are solving it, and we're already embodying the versions that the person wants to carry from that point onwards. One of the things I have to say proudly is that every time when people sign me up, they only sign me up once and I never see them again. And I actually believe, because my goal is not to make that as a habit, my goal is to make that as a solution for lifetime.
Wow. Okay. Then I don't know if you can answer this question, but maybe you can. Is there one specific area that people come to you that they're perplexed by, they're burdened by over and over again? That's like one thing that you can share with us and a solution for it.
Yes, and I'll do that and I'll share my info because we have 5 minutes, so we'll cover all of it. Okay, so one of the pattern that I'm noticing that people that are coming to me, because remember mirror, right? Everybody's a mirror to you. So everybody that I even attract is sharing something that is I need to listen through them. And one of the pattern I notice is that everybody's at the crossroad about having to be living in a matrix world, full-fledged because of the chasing success, and now becoming aware of their spiritual consciousness and listening to me on a next level soul or Gaia, and realizing that I would love to be more who I want to be rather than who I am, right? So that's the dichotomy that they're in. They all want to truly embody the person that they're recognizing within themselves. It's like a hidden gem, saying, oh my God, I just didn't even know that this is who I am. And now I'm realizing, but by the time it took me this long to realize it, I have created all these attachments that are not aligning with me. And what can I do to detach and truly create what I want?
Beautiful. This is so great. This is why I love to have these conversations, because hopefully that touched somebody who was watching and had a question, and maybe they'll work with you, maybe they'll look at your book, maybe they'll find something else that resonates, but it all helps us to all wake up the collective. So I'm imagining people who are watching right now will love to connect with you. You have such great energy. You're so smart. I feel like you're the full package. So tell people where they could work with you.
Yeah, so if you want to know more about me, please just type Shehnaz Soni on the Google and you'll find more things than I can imagine, because I am basically professionally, my website will give you all the ideas about me. It's Shehnaz Soni, my first name, last name, no space.com. And then I am social media, Instagram is where I'm pretty active. And then also LinkedIn professionally. And please check out my latest YouTube video, because I actually go deep dive into that experiment that I mentioned about the NASA Voyager. And I explain that how these type of bridges of science can help us validate what we already know. And then we can magnify and amplify our beliefs and truly embody who we really are.
Well, tell me what your YouTube channel is called.
So it's basically Shehnaz Soni.
Okay.
It's pretty much, it's
I'm
all
going to
under
put,
my.
I know, don't worry about the spelling, you guys. I'll put it in the show notes because it's not a traditional spelling. But what I will say is, since she's telling you to check out a video, these videos live in perpetuity. It is May of 2025. I don't know when this will come out, probably sometime in May or June of 2025. So you're gonna have to look in that time frame for this video that she's talking about. So
And I'll send you the link actually, Lori.
okay, perfect. I'll put it in the show notes.
Yep, to make it easy for all of us.
Well, Shehnaz, this has been such a great conversation, and I feel like we didn't even get to some things that I would love to explore more with you. So I would love to have you come back on and talk to you again. But I want to say to you, Thank you so much for your part in what you are doing to help wake up the collective consciousness. It is so needed right now.
Yes, 100% agree. And thank you, Laurie. It has been my pleasure.
And this show would be nothing without everybody who tunes in to watch. I'm so grateful. Thank you so much for watching.
Thank you.
Next up, check out this playlist of other NDE interviews. Please like and subscribe. It really helps this channel to grow so I can bring you more content. Thank you for watching. I'm so glad you're here.